Welcome back in, Geico Outkick Studio. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. We are joined now by Lance Taylor at the Lance Taylor, 94.5 Jocks down in Birmingham. Appreciate him swinging by to join us as he does many different Friday mornings. So, LT, I want to start with this. I know we talked about it last week in some way, but the Nick Saban having COVID story and then how the story just disappeared is kind of fascinating, right? And he coaches, and it's like it never happened now. But for a week, it was all everybody was talking about after he announced that he was positive. And then Alabama goes out and gets the big win over Georgia. They've now beaten A&M. So the Saban angle, but also with the A&M win and the win over Georgia, do you kind of feel like Alabama's cruising now? Like it's like they've been through the trials and tribulations already. The last 6 on their schedule don't look very tough, and that starts with Tennessee and Knoxville this weekend, coming off of a bad loss against Kentucky.
Outside of the game in Baton Rouge, which, we'll see if LSU is able to rebound tomorrow against South Carolina, I think they're going to be 14-plus point favorites in every game at least.
Yeah.
And so, I agree with you, man. I just don't think they're really going to be challenged. I thought it was an interesting first half against Georgia, and at times this young defense looks a little lost. Pete Golding, the defensive coordinator, is taking a lot of heat, but they got right in the second half, man. I mean, to be down at 4 at half, to outscore Georgia 21-0 in that second half. Mac Jones, I mean, there is, people talk about maybe a step back with going from Tua to Mac. Tua seems like a generational player, the best quarterback in Alabama history. Mac Jones, I'm not going to say he's better than Tua. That would be a bold statement, but his deep ball, the way he's played up until this point, the weapons around him, I mean, this offense is, if it's not the best in college football, it's one of the top 2 or 3.
There's no doubt at all about it. Now, I know you watch a lot of college football too, and I watched Alabama, and again, given the context of the way the situation is set up now, with Alabama such a huge favorite, as you mentioned, the rest of the way, and having already beaten A&M and having already beaten Georgia, I think Alabama's basically penciled themselves into the college football playoff, because even if I think they're going to go 10-0. And then they go to Atlanta. It doesn't really matter who they play, probably Georgia or Florida. It would be a huge upset if it wasn't one of those two. Even if they lost that game, they'd be in the playoff because they'd be 10-1. I feel like Clemson came out and just absolutely took it to Georgia Tech. I mean, 73-9. I know Notre Dame, UNC, they may have aspirations for the ACC title. We've already seen Clemson take down Miami in a big way. I'd be stunned if Clemson isn't in the college football playoff. Are you with me that basically you can almost write in Clemson and Alabama this season?
Yeah, 100%. And I think they'll probably be 1 and 2 seeds, and I think ultimately we'll see them play for a national championship. The wild card is obviously Ohio State. We've yet to see the Big Ten play. They seem to be getting a layup this weekend, opening up with Nebraska. People think that Penn State is one of these fringe contenders. I know you're good friends with James Franklin. I'm not buying it. I think Penn State's got maybe the trickiest game in the Big Ten this weekend, heading to Bloomington, a really difficult game last year for the Nittany Lions. This Indiana offense can score points, so I think that's going to be a really interesting game tomorrow. But Ohio State is that wild card. But I agree with you. I think Clemson, Alabama, I'd be borderline shocked if those two are not in the college football playoff this year.
I know that we spend a lot of time talking about things that go bad, but the SEC, knock on wood, looks like all 4 games scheduled for today are going to play. Sorry, by today I mean tomorrow. Auburn, Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina, LSU. It's a fairly weak slate so far. But what letter grade would you give the SEC, and what would your expectation have been if I had told you through the first 5 weeks of the season the SEC was going to get 30 out of the 32 games they had scheduled all in?
Yeah, are you talking about what grade are we giving teams overall, the league?
Just no, the fact that we're actually going to have, like if you've been setting an over-under for postponements, it appears we're going to have 30 out of the 32 games scheduled basically as they were to be played. That seems like an extraordinary success rate as we come up on almost halfway through the season for many teams.
That's an A+. I mean, you look at the Big 12, it seems like they're missing games every other weekend. I mean, when's the last time we saw Baylor out? Oklahoma State has been affected by this. There's teams all over the country and programs that have been affected by COVID, and the SEC has cruised along. So I agree. I mean, that's remarkable when you think about the percentages. I mean, it's really NFL-like.
Yeah, I mean, it totally is. And speaking of NFL-like, there's not a ton I would say, of huge college football games. The Big Ten obviously playing is a big storyline. I talked about that some to open up the show, about how excited I am just to have the Big Ten back in general. When you go to the NFL, I watch them all the time, so I'm not sure how much time you've spent watching the Titans. I've been and watched them play twice in person. First time against the Bills, second time against the Texans. The Steelers are coming to town this weekend. Are you as impressed by the Titans as I am? What do you expect in the Titans-Steelers game? And how wacky is it? Usually you don't see the NFL lines move that much. This line has moved like 4 points from the Steelers as a 2-point favorite to the most recent line that I have seen with the Titans around a 2-point favorite.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, too. I don't know if you realize this. Only the 8th matchup in NFL history of teams 5-0 or better against each other. And, Tennessee last weekend, unfortunately, I had the Texans. I don't know why Romeo Crennel went for 2 in that situation. The only way I could get beat, is that game going to overtime. They lose the toss, and then Derrick Henry takes the game over. That was a bad beat, and Derrick Henry is a man. But hey, I know you probably know this. The last 16 games together, Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill are 13-3, which is ridiculous, and that offense is averaging about 31 points per game. So the Titans have a legitimate offense. I think you can make a MVP argument for either one of those guys. Defense at times gives up some big plays, and that's my fear with Pittsburgh. Chase Claypool might be your NFL Rookie of the Year right now, at least until this point. James Conner is playing at a high level. They've got Juju. Ben Roethlisberger seems to be healthy. They've got arguably the best defense in football. I've just got a feeling Pittsburgh goes on the road and knocks off your Titans. I think it'll be a hell of a game, though.
Here's a story that I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in the program, I think, because I do think it's a pretty significant story. All of the Titans players who tested positive for COVID are back, and they're effectively going to be playing this weekend on Sunday. So every time one of these guys tested positive, it was an, oh my God, it's unbelievable. The Titans have another positive. Everybody was running around like their hair was on fire. Now all of these players are back. None of them have had any kind of significant health issue at all. And I bet I'm the only person out there with a national sports talk radio show who will even point out that all of the players who had tested positive and were not able to play for a while are back, and the Titans have their full roster and allotment of players without any COVID-related issues. Shouldn't that be a pretty big story if we're going to treat all of the positives as massive stories? Shouldn't the return of all these players without any sort of significant health impact be significant as well?
Absolutely. I didn't even really know that until you just said it.
I mean, you're not hearing it from anybody. But you saw all the positives, like I'm saying, right? Like you saw the drumbeat of, oh, my God, here's another positive.
If any staffer gets tested positive, you hear about it. So, yeah, I think it's very significant. I think it's obviously been underreported. And back to Nick Saban, you're right, it was a huge story until the fact that he gets 3 negative tests in a row, and they call it a false positive, and he's able to coach. And then everybody just kind of drops the whole situation. And I thought that whole you wonder, Clay, I mean, if that's Will Muschamp that tests positive or Kalani Sitake at BYU, do you think they're even given the opportunity to have 3 more tests to see if they can actually?
Well, I think this is a credit to the SEC, but honestly, what it makes me think. So, we went to the White House on Wednesday, and I had to get a COVID test in order to be able to have access to the West Wing and to the leaders of the nation, which probably is a good proxy, a good position to have, right? And so I tested negative, right? And that's the second COVID test that I've had since March. I took a COVID test back in July. People who listen to this program, they had drive-through COVID testing in my part of town in Nashville. And I was like, you know what? I want to know what a test actually feels like if I'm going to be talking about as many positive and negative tests and everything else. I want to know what the protocol was like. So I tested negative back in, I think it was July. Somebody can go check the archives. I talked about it on this program. Drove through. And, I mean, that was like the excessive test, right, where they basically put a probe, it feels like all the way up into your brain to rub it around. The new one at the White House that they were doing took an hour to get a result. And it was just a basic nasal swab. It wasn't in any way difficult. It didn't hurt. And they do it for the press in the West Wing pretty much every day. If you're covering the White House, they are there, and they make the choice to kind of give you a little bit of a nasal swab, right? Like that's a commonplace activity there that they do. But I've now been tested twice. when I see all these false positives, and Nick Saban is a good example, and we've seen them happen a ton with players and with different support staff, and those guys are getting tested multiple times, they have the luxury to be able to go back and say, wait a minute, this is negative instead of positive. How many people out there tested positive and never had it at all and quarantined for 2 weeks and didn't work and kept their kids out of school? I mean, I don't think it's crazy to think there are millions of people in the country that applies to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it could be as significant as 15, 20%. I mean, really, who knows the number? I mean, I know so many people that have tested positive. Like you said, they've been quarantined for 10 days.
Didn't have any symptoms, didn't feel bad at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they felt completely fine. And they're like, it's basically just watching Netflix. I know guys that have been out, running 6 miles a day, still drinking because they're like, I just don't feel it. I feel great. But I tested positive, and I can't go back to work, and my kids can't go to school. And so, yeah, I agree with you. It's probably a significant number that we'll never know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely crazy. All right, as we kind of look forward for college football and the NFL, do you buy? So we talked about the Steelers and we talked about the Titans, 5-0, both. You think the Steelers are going to win. Do you buy into the Seahawks with their defense being able to maintain the level of excellence that they've shown so far, particularly in the really tough NFC West, where I know you're a fan of the Rams, so you watch a lot of those games? Where do we go from here? Are the Seahawks truly the best team in the NFC?
Well, I mean, the good news for the Seahawks is you might have the best player in football right now in Russell Wilson with the 19 touchdowns through 5 games, which is the second most in history. It's been amazing offensively. DK Metcalf, I think I've seen you tweet before, is he the best receiver in the NFL? You could at least make that argument right now.
Yep.
So they've got the weapons offensively along with Lockett. I think Chris Carson is a guy that can do a lot of things out of the backfield. But you're right, defensively, I'm not sure. And now you get Kyler Murray, and I've got kind of a weird situation. One of my best friends decided not to get Sunday ticket, and he's a Cardinals fan. So the Rams-Cardinals games have been staggered back and forth with a lot of East Coast games. So he's been able to come over here and watch his Cardinals. So I've been stuck watching the Arizona Cardinals. And Kyler Murray is one of these electric players, but in 22 starts, he's 9-12-1 and still has 1 million balls batted down. So, he's an electric guy when he gets on the outside and he creates with the feet. And obviously having DeAndre Hopkins has been a big lift for that offense. But if the Seahawks really want to flex this weekend, you can't get beat by Kyler Murray. I think the Seahawks minus 3.5 on the road, I kind of like them in this spot. And I think the defense is going to get better. I mean, Pete Carroll's a defensive guy.
Yeah, you would think at some point they are going to get better. We'll have to see from there going forward. Do you expect, I know I'm bouncing around from NFL and college football, but I want to go back to the Big Ten being back in play. Do you expect for Ohio State to truly be head and shoulders above everybody else in the Big Ten? We talked already about the fact that Clemson and Alabama feel like kind of foregone conclusions to be in the college football playoff. Is Ohio State that much better than everybody else in the Big Ten?
I think they probably are. It's almost a Lincoln Riley from it, and this is probably a bad example this year with Oklahoma. But for the first 3 seasons with Lincoln Riley and Norman from Bob Stoops, and that's kind of what it looked like last year, making the transition from Urban Meyer to Ryan Day. They've just got SEC athletes all over the place. And Justin Fields in that offense, I think they're going to be nearly impossible to stop in that conference. And I really just don't know who competes with them. Next week against Penn State will be interesting. We'll see what Penn State looks like this week against Indiana. But outside of that, Jack Cohn is injured for Wisconsin. Michigan's breaking in a new quarterback in Joe Milton. And, Harbaugh, you can go on and just book it. He's going to lose at least 3 games every year. This is kind of the way it is. They've got a difficult opener in Minnesota. So, yeah, I think it's Ohio State and everybody else. It almost reminds me right now of what you've got back to Alabama in the SEC and Clemson in the ACC.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've made the analogy for a long time that Clemson right now in the ACC feels like USC back in the days of Leinart, Bush, and Lindell when they were absolutely dominant and nobody else was on their same level. And I know UNC and Miami and Notre Dame are pretenders for the ACC crown, but I don't think they're real contenders. And so I think right now you would have to make Ohio State, even though we haven't seen them play, which obviously is a bit of an exaggeration, but we'll see this weekend against Nebraska how they look, and I expect that the answer will be really good. And then Clemson and then Alabama. And the team to me that is kind of under the radar and could sneak its way into the playoff and not many people are talking about, I'm curious if you think this as well, is Texas A&M. Because if you look at the remainder of their schedule, there's a decent chance they make the run all the way to 9-1. I think you would have to look at their schedule and say there's a very good chance they go 8-2, and I don't think 9-1 is out of the question at all. And if that happens and Alabama beats Georgia or Florida in the SEC title game, since those teams already have one loss, I think there could be a chance that 9-1 A&M is sitting there and might look like the best available option outside of Ohio State, Alabama, and Clemson.
You know, I mean, there's a possibility. I'm not sold on this A&M team. Another double-digit win this past weekend against Mississippi State when the offense that is completely lost right now. I just don't trust Kellen Mond. You know, had the game of his life against Florida and that first top 5 win for Jimbo as A&M's head coach. We'll see where they go. You know, the interesting thing is before COVID and the reschedule in the SEC and the conference-only schedule, I thought A&M had one of the easiest schedules in college football, and I thought it was going to be a layup for them to go 10-2 just based on that schedule. And then the reschedule, I thought they got punished the worst. And I thought they had one of the more difficult schedules, but based on the way the first 4 weeks of the SEC has played out, now it does look possible that they could navigate and go 9-1. But again, is Kellen Mond going to be able to be consistently good week to week? And I still think there's a lot of teams that can beat A&M. I mean, you just look at a team like, you know, from Arkansas, Ole Miss. I mean, these are teams, you know, week in, week out that can just pop up and beat you.
Yeah, and that's the question, whether A&M is going to have the wherewithal or stick-to-itiveness to be substantially better, even a Tennessee or an Auburn with Bo Nix and Jarrett Garantano, who both Auburn and Tennessee fans are completely fed up with. It's possible that one of those guys could have a decent game, and suddenly they are in position to steal a game from A&M. And plus, we've seen Jimbo's team slip up before, right? Even when they were great at Florida State, they were in a lot of tight games with teams that were substantially inferior. As we roll into the weekend, appreciate you joining us, my man, and hope you have a good final weekend before Halloween. By the way, what are you doing for Halloween? Are you coming to the Halloween party?
I'm thinking about coming out to your Halloween party. I mean, the good news is it's Friday night, so I can still get, you know, settled and watch all the games on Saturday. You know, as far as Halloween, I'm watching games. But, yeah, there's a good possibility. I mean, I would think that you've got one of these over-the-top, you know, swanky parties. I mean, how crazy do the costumes have to be? I've been thinking about this.
Well, I mean, people are pretty dressed up. You know, I mean, it's not like an insane I don't know. I don't even know how to describe, but everybody has to come in a costume. So, like, you can't show up like in a, you know, basic. Everybody is noticeably in costumes. I wouldn't say it's swanky. I mean, there's lots of alcohol and everybody has a good time. But yeah, I think you'd have a good time if you come up.
Okay, have you already decided? I know you probably don't want to break it out, you know, coast to coast right now, what you're going as. But you guys have already figured out the costumes. Okay.
Yeah, my wife has picked our costumes the last 4 years, and they have been at least somewhat couple costume-y. Which, when you throw a Halloween party, I think
so. You guys could be going as Bill and Hillary Clinton, right?
Yeah, we could theoretically be Bill and Hillary Clinton. We're not Bill and Hillary. Like I'll give you examples. Last year, I was Jon Snow and she was Daenerys right after Jon Snow stabbed her, right? So like she had the dagger, like the dagger in her stomach that was you know, kind of fastened, and then I was Jon Snow. The year before that, I was Macho Man and she was Miss Elizabeth, and the year before that, I can't even remember exactly what it was, and she'd probably remember a lot better than I would. So we've had, you know, the couple costumes for a while as we've been having our Halloween parties.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to try to make plans. I'm going to sleep on your couch. So Laura's okay with that.
You know what the truth is? There are so many hotel rooms that don't cost anything right now because almost no one is on the roads anywhere. So, I mean, you can get an incredible hotel room in Nashville right now for $100, which ordinarily is not the case at all.
Upsetting.
I know.
You remember you and I, we had the Airbnb for a preseason game, and things got a little sideways.
Yeah, I tried to get you a place booked because it was impossible to actually get a hotel room. I mean, like, for a while there, Nash, that's true.
It's the last time I slept on a futon. I was a grown man sleeping on a futon when I came in because we could not get a hotel because Nashville used to be the biggest pain in the ass town to get a hotel in.
That's true. I mean, the city was so underbuilt for hotels, and that's really what kind of led Airbnbs all over the city of Nashville to explode. A lot of people, that was the only place they could find to stay. LT, we will talk to you. Well, hopefully I'll talk to you next week, and hopefully I'll see you at the party next week as well.
Yeah, perfect. Have a great weekend, Clay.
Will do.